Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another edition of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Jokey. As always, I got my co-host, Jack Curry, rolling with me. How you doing, Jack?
I'm doing well, man. Still adjusting to the new world and society we live in, but it's business as usual on the pod. We're inching closer to the draft, and looking forward to this week's topic for episode.
Yeah, for sure. I'm unfortunately going to be home for the next month or so, maybe longer, depending on how this all plays out. So there's going to be a lot more content than what everybody's used to in terms of the website over at the Dogland and here on the podcast as well. So what we wanted to do this week is we're going to dive into the draft rooms of everybody in the AFC North. And what that entails is we're going to go through all their free agency additions, their current roster, the players that they lost in free agency, and then ultimately take a look at their draft boards, look at their position and needs, considering we're less than a month away from the draft. We have a 3-round mock draft that we're going to do and discuss. We took the 5 best players available at each position or at each draft pick for the teams. And so we're going to do that throughout this entire week for all of the AFC North. And we're going to start with the Bengals here in the North. And Jack, when you look at the Bengals roster, obviously they're kind of in rebuild mode right now. They had their worst season in quite a long time last year. Andy Dalton is going to be replaced here. He's in the last year of his deal. It's ultimately just a matter of time when he's going to be released. But Jack, when you look at the Bengals as a whole, what do you see the state of the franchise? What would you say is their state of the franchise right now?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely in a semi-rebuilding mode. I mean, I look at this roster and I see some holes, but I don't see a lot of holes to where they need to tear it down, much like the Browns did 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, there is talent on this Bengals team. There's just, the quarterback position definitely needs improved, which is obviously what they're going to do here in a few weeks. On the defensive side of the ball, they have some young talent. They have some guys that have been the stalwarts on that side of the ball, and they're going to have to look to replace them here pretty soon because they're hitting their 10th season this upcoming year. And then you see spots that really need improved. The offensive line, probably their biggest weakness in terms of position groups. So, they'll get the quarterback position hopefully straightened here in a couple weeks for them. It's not so good news for the Browns if Joe Burrow pans out, which we all think is going to be the pick. But then they need to build up what they have in front of them. There's talent around him at the skill positions, and then on the defensive side of the ball, continue to add depth and look towards the future on that side.
Yeah, one of the things they did right away in free agency is they signed defensive tackle DJ Reader away from the Houston Texans, and they're adding him to a defensive line that has Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins, and Sam Hubbard across the starting line there. And when you look at it as a whole, you could say that the defensive line that they've had over the course of the last 5 or 6 years has been really solid. And to add a player like DJ Reader to that defensive line is a very strong move. And, in the AFC North, where teams like to run the ball and you need to have a good pass rush, D-line is not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals on paper have a solid defensive line. Obviously, you talked about Dunlap and Adkins. They've been there for a long time, both entering their 10th season, coming up in 2020. Sam Hubbard was a mid-round pick for them a couple years ago. He's been okay, hasn't been, what some people might have thought he'd be coming out of Ohio State. And then obviously they had Andrew Billings, who they let walk in free agency, and he just drove right up I-71 and signed with the Browns. But, to get Reeder, I think a lot of people were shocked because Cincinnati normally isn't a team that goes out and spends a lot of money in free agency. And to get Reeder and to pay him what they did, obviously he is one of the top defensive tackles in the league. So it was definitely a strong get for them as they look to, like I said, rebuild the defense. Well, not essentially rebuild, but tweak it, add some pieces to that side of the ball because the last couple of years, the Bengals defense hasn't been that solid.
Yeah, in their effort to solidify the back end of the defense, they spent a lot of money in the secondary. They gave Trey Waynes a 3-year deal, over $40 million. They signed Mackenzie Alexander to a 1-year deal, only $4 million. So really not much high risk there. And then they signed Von Bell away from the New Orleans Saints, another Buckeye, to be on that defense as well. So they started to piecemeal the back end of the defense together to a defense that has Drake Kirkpatrick, has been there for a long time, William Jackson, who's entering the last year of his rookie deal. So there's some interesting pieces on the defense for the Bengals. It's just a matter of, are they going to be able to keep up with, the high-powered offenses that are in the AFC North, and will these free agents be able to come in and perform at a high level?
Yeah, I mean, the secondary on paper looks really good. I mean, Drake Kirkpatrick's been around for a long time. William Jackson, been inconsistent, been hurt. Like you said, they added Trey Waynes, which was a huge get for them, and Mackenzie Alexander, both coming from Mike Zimmer's defense in Minnesota. So that just shows that Mike Brown and the Bengals front office has a lot of respect for Zimmer and what he's done on the defensive side. Obviously, he was their former defensive coordinator. Adding Von Bell to go along with Jesse Bates and Sean Williams in the safety room, much needed depth. They could add another piece potentially in the draft. But that secondary looks really good. The defensive line looks good. Yeah, the linebackers, looking at their depth chart, they have Jermaine Pratt, they have Jordan Evans as their projected starters, and they added Josh Bynes from the Ravens in free agency. They need some depth at the linebacker position. But, this defense looks like it has improved. It's just a matter of, can they stay healthy? Can they stay consistent?
Yeah, consistency is a key, and especially staying healthy too. So, they're certainly, like you said, on paper, it doesn't look bad, but it's certainly interesting to see. It's going to be the offense that is going to have to carry this team, and when you look at the offense, the offensive line is something that they really need to address, and they did that at least in one position in free agency, signing guard Xavier Su'a-Filo away from the Dallas Cowboys and bringing him to the Cincinnati Bengals. And when you look at their offensive line, they have Jonah Williams, their first-round pick last year, left tackle. They have Billy Price at left guard and center, depending on where he's going to play. He was their first-round pick 2 years ago, who has struggled quite immensely. They have Michael Jordan at guard, also from Ohio State. And then at right tackle, they have Bobby Hart. And that's somebody who needs to perform better as well. So when you look at this offensive line and potentially bringing in a rookie quarterback, this is probably the biggest question on the roster right now.
Absolutely. And, they had Cordy Glenn, who they ultimately cut right before free agency. He was not panning out for them. They're going to get Jonah Williams back, but you have to wonder, how's the knee going to hold up? This is a guy they spent a top 10 draft pick on. He missed all of his rookie campaign. If he can come back, you hope that he's going to be the next left tackle. I wouldn't say the next Anthony Munoz, which I'm sure Bengals fans would love if Williams became that, but that's a stretch because Munoz is one of the greatest ever and he's in the Hall of Fame. Billy Price, inconsistent as a offensive lineman so far. He was their number one pick a couple years ago. And then, you look, Suafilo, he's been up and down his whole career, was a high draft pick for the Texans, ultimately ended up with Dallas. They needed to solidify the right tackle spot because Bobby Hart was awful for them. And then you got to wonder about the center position because you drafted Price to be that, but right now Hopkins is penciled in as the projected starting center. So they definitely need to upgrade that at some point this offseason, and ultimately it's going to point towards the draft unless they make a trade perhaps for, say, a Trent Williams, and which he's out there and he's the best offensive tackle available, but they don't have the cap space to add him currently.
Let's talk about some of their losses because you did mention that they did cut Gordy Klender off offensive tackle. They also lost John Miller, another tackle. They also lost their tight end, Tyler Eifert, who has struggled with so many different injuries in his time with the Bengals. He left as well. They lost Andrew Billings, as you mentioned, who came here to Cleveland. Cornerbacks, Darqueze Dennard and B.W. Webb also left as well. So when you look at those losses, Jack, which one of those is going to impact the Bengals the most?
I would say, because, Glenn and Miller were inconsistent on the offensive line, so they won't be a loss. I would say Billings, because if you could have had him and Reeder in between Dunlap and Adkins, or rotated, Adkins and Billings, I think that would have made their defensive line even stronger. Billings obviously dealt with injuries, but he is a good defensive tackle, a good run stuffer. Now he's going to come up here to Cleveland and be alongside Sheldon Richardson, push Larry Ogunjobi. I think that hurts the Bengals, and that's going to hurt benefit the Browns more than anything.
Yeah, and in those two games we played against the Bengals, with them having a weak interior of the offensive line, somebody like Billings is going to definitely make an impact, or potentially make an impact in those games against the Bengals this season. They did use the franchise tag on AJ Green. He did not play at all last year, battled injury. They thought he was going to come back, but ultimately didn't. What do you think their plan is going to be with AJ Green? Are they going to give him a new contract? Are they going to wait to see if he's healthy before doing so? Because they did sign Tyler Boyd to an extension before last season. They gave him a 4-year deal, around $8 million per year. They have John Ross, who has been kind of a disappointment, has also battled injuries constantly over his rookie contract. They have to make a decision whether or not to pick up his 5th-year option. So what do you think the plan is going to be with AJ Green and the Cincinnati Bengals?
Well, I think they'd ultimately like to keep him, but I got the sense last year that with AJ Green sitting out, I know he had an injury he had to deal with in camp, but I think he was more or less sitting out to tell them, like, I don't want to be here long term. I think he's tired of the losing. I wouldn't say the turnover, because Marvin Lewis was his head coach for the majority of his time in Cincinnati. I just think Green's tired of the losing. Like, he's been to the playoffs a couple times, but they never got past the wild card round or the divisional round, depending on how they finished out the season. But I just think Green wants to go to a contender. He's obviously on the backside of his career, would like to go win. There were trade rumors at the deadline last year, but ultimately he never got moved. So, maybe they work out something. Maybe he signs the tag and they ultimately trade him. But I think the Bengals would like to keep him. It's kind of unclear what Green's stance is on the franchise and going forward.
Yeah, it's certainly a situation that it's very curious. I wonder if it's going to have anything to do with the rookie quarterback that they're going to bring in. If the quarterback that they bring in performs well, it could be an incentive to stay. Obviously, having a veteran receiver and a rookie quarterback is a good combination to have to help the rookie out. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I think ultimately he will move on. I don't know if they could find a trade partner. He does have a $17 million cap hit. but I think that ultimately they're gonna find somebody to trade him to. I don't think at this point in AJ Green's career he's gonna want to stay with the Bengals. And I guess that in order for them to find a trade partner, somebody has to want him. And coming off the injury, that's certainly something that teams are going to be very wary about and potentially trading for somebody like AJ Green. When you look at the rest of the offensive roster, we talked about the wide receiver position a little bit. They do have good running backs. And Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard, those two have been there for quite a while. They do have two rookies, also running back, or they had two rookies last year, running back, Travion Williams and Rodney Anderson. Tight ends, they have CJ Uzuma, who's going to be entering his sixth season with the Bengals, and Drew Sample, who was a second-round pick last year, as their projected starters at that position. When you look at this offense as a whole, the running backs, receivers, and tight ends, the skill position for a rookie quarterback, potential rookie quarterback, they actually look pretty good. And it certainly could be a good situation for somebody like Joe Burrow to come in here and have success based on the talent that is around him.
Yeah, definitely. Like, the cupboard is not bare coming in for Joe Burrow. I mean, Boyd broke out with Green being gone. You know, they had John Ross, who, when he was on the field, he was making an impact last year, finally, after a few injury-plagued seasons to start out his career. And then you have Auden Tate, which I know our buddy Jeff Floyd absolutely loved coming out of Florida State. He showed flashes as well. So, and if Green comes back, right, there's another weapon added. Uzma didn't show enough. Sample was hurt all last year, so hopefully he bounces back. And then obviously you have Joe Mixon, who's I would imagine he wants to talk extension with them. They have Giovanni Bernard. It'd be interesting to see if they maybe add a running back and move on from Bernard. They also have Rodney Anderson, who is a talented prospect coming out of Oklahoma. So there's guys there at running back for the Bengals. And obviously at receiver and tight end as well. So Burrow's coming into a decent situation. They could improve. Definitely at the tight end position, just because there's unknown there. But Burrow's going to have weapons around him. You just need to beef up that offensive line and continue to add talent on the defensive side of the ball. And if Burrow is as good as he was at LSU, the Bengals aren't too far away from competing again in the AFC North.
Yeah, this wide receiving class is a really deep one, and I think that bodes well for Cincinnati. The tight end class isn't that great. There's maybe one or two, maybe three guys that they could draft that would fit in there and be a potential starter for them. The running back class is another one that's very deep. So, with the skill position class being deep, there's certainly talent to add to this roster that is going through kind of a mini rebuild like we discussed. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, the quarterback position, they're going to be looking to replace Andy Dalton. He does have 1 year left on his deal, but we would imagine that at some point they're going to release him and let him sign with somebody else. Or I don't really see a situation, Jack, where they have Joe Burrow and they decide to keep Andy Dalton for the last year on his contract.
You would think they wouldn't, but a few days ago, Ian Rappaport said on NFL Total Access that they have talked about even keeping him, at least for the year. They said they're in no rush to move him. There was trade talks with, I think, the Bears before they added Nick Foles. I can't remember where I seen the report, but I heard that Cincinnati wanted a second-round pick for Andy Dalton, and that just absolutely floors me. Not saying Dalton's a bad quarterback, because he isn't, but he's like a mid-level quarterback. You're not going to get a second-round pick for him, unfortunately. New England has always seemed to make sense for him as a potential landing spot. They don't have the cap space to add him because they're on the hook for Tom Brady's signing bonus from a previous contract. So I would think Dalton is either going to be with the Bengals or he's going to go somewhere really cheap after they cut him. So it's just a matter of where is he going to go, because a lot of the QB landing spots are either filled up already or just don't seem like a ideal situation for Dalton.
Yeah, I think they're gonna wait a while to decide on Andy Dalton because whether they release him now, whether they trade him now, or whether they release or trade him later on, past that June 1st designation, they'll save the entire amount of his contract from their cap. So I think it would be smart for the Bengals, and that using that term with the Bengals is kind of ironic, but I think it would be smart for the Bengals to hold on to him at least through training camp and maybe through the preseason, because there's always injuries and there's always that unexpected thing that happens, unfortunately, during preseason, during training camp. And if a quarterback goes down for any team, I can certainly see a situation where Andy Dalton's maybe the first guy, maybe Derek Carr's the second guy, or vice versa, that teams are going to be looking for to potentially replace their starting quarterback if somebody were to get injured.
Yeah, definitely. And having a veteran like Dalton around for Burrow to, show him how to be a professional quarterback, show him around Cincinnati, and just be a mentor for him. Obviously, Dalton is probably aware that he's not the long-term answer there in Cincinnati anymore. So it might be wise for him to be a good professional and help Burrow out this rookie year. And then, maybe transition into that mentor role where he could go, be a backup quarterback somewhere, make good money, and just be a mentor for any rookie quarterback, throughout the rest of his NFL career.
Do you see any kind of situation where, Joe Burrow comes in, performs well, Dalton sticks around this year, and then maybe, they sign him to like a Chase Daniel deal where he's just the backup for the last 3 or 4 years of his career?
It's definitely possible. I mean, if everything is on good terms, if Cincinnati doesn't steer Dalton wrong and shows him like, this is the direction we're going to go in, we think highly of you, but we also, this is the best plan for us moving forward. If they're good to Dalton, I'm sure Dalton would be good to them as well. And because they took a chance on him in 2011, molded him into a solid NFL quarterback, and he brought them a lot of success. So if they stay on good terms together, I could see a scenario like that. But, if an team comes calling to his agent and says, hey, we want him to be our quarterback, a bridge quarterback, we'll pay him X amount of money, you have to definitely consider that as well.
We've talked about Joe Burrow so much in this podcast already and on this episode that I think it's pretty obvious, Jack, where we're going to go with the number 1 pick in the 3-round mock that we're going to do here in a second. But what I want to ask you first is, if they don't believe Joe Burrow is the guy, if for any reason, is there another quarterback you think that they would take at number 1, or are there? I know there's teams like the Raiders and the Dolphins who certainly have the assets to trade up to that number 1 pick to get the quarterback that they want potentially, and to where it could be convincing to the Bengals to add more picks, trade down, and then do whatever they see if they don't believe Joe Burrow is the guy.
If they don't think Joe Burrow's the guy, they strongly have to consider taking Tua Tagovailoa. And then in that scenario, you keep Andy Dalton, you essentially redshirt Tua, and you let Dalton play the 2020 season. You go sign another quarterback. You put Tua on IR, and then 2021 moving forward, you go with Tua. You consider a trade down, absolutely, because if they said, hey, Burrow's not our guy, we'll take calls, teams will come and they will give up the king's ransom to get Joe Burrow. Because if they took Tua at 1 and say Washington goes on the clock at 2, Washington might take him, but then Washington might go ahead and say, hey, we'll take the king's ransom and do the reverse of what we did in 2012 when we moved up all of those took all those picks and gave them to the Rams for RG3. So if it wasn't Burrow, I'd say take Tua, I would strongly consider the trade down and get as many picks as possible.
Yeah, I mean, with the Dolphins sitting there at 5, the Raiders are 4? You can help me out here. I know they're very close to that.
The Raiders are 12.
With 12? All right.
Yeah.
Well, I know the Raiders have 2 first-rounders, so
right.
Obviously the Dolphins have 3. So those are certainly 2 teams. I don't know if they'd move all the way back down to 12, but with the Dolphins having 5, I think 18 and 26, somewhere in that range. Those are certainly 2 teams that are looking for quarterbacks that could move up potentially to number 1. But I think it's pretty obvious and pretty well known that Joe Burrow is going to be the guy in Cincinnati, barring any kind of trade down or last second decision. So when you look at Burrow, and we've talked about it a little bit, what success do you think he could have coming into Cincinnati his rookie season, provided that they decide to start him game 1?
I mean, I think he's good enough to where he can elevate that franchise to, they could probably win 5 to 7 games his rookie year. Granted, they need to upgrade the offensive line because we've seen Dalton the last couple of years has taken a beating because that line has been so poor. So you hope, obviously, that, hey, Jonah Williams comes back and is healthy, and right there's your left tackle, so you'll have someone to protect Burrow's blind side. But then if they can upgrade the right side of the offensive line somehow, I think that will be better even moving forward. And if you have someone like A.J. Green back and healthy and committed, right there you have Green, you have Boyd, you have Mixon and Bernard to lean on in the running game. If Burrow's as good as advertised, you can win much more than the 5 to 7 maybe. Maybe you win 8, 9 games with a rookie quarterback. But if they don't improve the offensive line, Burrow might take his licks. He might have a tough rookie season. We've seen that plenty in Cleveland. So, I mean, the success will be based on what Cincinnati does to build around him, not only on the offensive side, but also the defensive side of the ball too.
Yeah, you made a great point there. All they really have to do is look to Cleveland and see what's gone on here last couple of seasons. You could have all the talent in the world at the skill positions around a young quarterback, but if you don't have the offensive line you need to protect said quarterback and give him time to throw, Burrow is mobile, so that does help. But if you don't have the offensive line, things are not going to go well. And so they really need to focus on that O-line a little bit and decide what they want to do in that position to protect the young franchise quarterback that they're going to be drafting with the number 1 pick. Sitting at round 2, the what we did, besides Joe Burrow, we have that were available at each pick. So we did the 5 best players available. You have 2 quarterbacks here. Since they already took one, we might as well take those guys off. But the players that are available for the Bengals, pick 1 in the second round: safety Grant Delpit, running back J.K. Dobbins, AJ, goodness gracious, Epinenza. I think that's going to be close.
We'll go with that.
That's as close as it's going to get. And then I'll grab a couple more players here. T. Higgins and Antoine Whitfield Jr. When you look at those possibilities, Jack, who do you think fits the Bengals best in this situation?
I always go with the best player available method. And, at this point, you took the quarterbacks off the board. Running back didn't seem to make sense at this point because they have Joe Mixon and they still have Giovanni Bernard and Rodney Anderson, like I mentioned earlier. So when I looked at it, and I feel like they're pretty good at safety for the moment. So Delpit was already off. So I went with AJ Epinenza here. And I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, but, they have Hubbard. So, and then you have Carlos Dunlap. Like I said, he's entering his 10th season. They need to start planning for the future. You get at Penenza. I don't know how you pronounce that. We'll have to look that up. But you bring him in, rotate him and Hubbard on the one side. Obviously, Dunlap's still effective. And then whenever they decide to move on from Dunlap, you put Hubbard or you put AJ in that slot, and then you have your pass rushers moving forward. But then say they have a top draft pick in 2021 and there's this great edge rusher out there, it doesn't take that they won't shy away, because while Hubbard and AJ are both solid pass rushers and should be at the NFL level, if there's an elite pass rusher there and they had the chance to get him, that shouldn't stop them from taking that guy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that if they were to take an edge guy, I think it would be a great fit, especially if it's somebody that they can bring in on third down, or they decide to move Dunlap to third downs and allow the rookie to play the first couple, so that way there's more. Dunlap could stay a little bit more rested throughout the game. I'd be okay with that, and I certainly don't hate the pick. But if they were able to find somebody and they decide that AJ Green's not going to be there, I would love the T. Higgins pick for him. I think that would be a great selection for him, to go along with Tyler Boyd, get another rookie receiver in there, because you don't know the certainty of John Ross and what he's going to have. If you're able to add those two guys, or to have Boyd and T. Higgins to go along with Auden Tate, I think that would be a very solid receiving core for a rookie quarterback in Joe Burrow to move forward with past this season and beyond. So I don't hate your pick, but in this situation, I would go with T. Higgins. But I trust you, and we'll go with AJ Espenza for the sake of this mock draft. The third round pick, the 5 players that we have available are safety Jeremy Chin, safety Kyler Duggar, safety Ashton Davis, running back Cam Akers, and wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. When you look at these 5 guys, Jack, obviously you have 3 safeties here, which kind of makes sense, but you also have a good running back and a really good wide receiver at this point. What route would you go in here?
I went with the safety, and once again, I go best player available. So went with Jeremy Chin. He's a guy that's starting to pick up some noise, and there's been the discussion where he could be the first safety off the board ahead of Grant Delpit, Kyle Duggar, Antoine Winfield Jr. To get him at the 3rd round at this point would be great. The Draft Network, all their guys have done great breakdowns of him. Talking about how great of an athlete he is, how he can fit into that strong safety role, and could be even a potential sub-package linebacker. We talked about how linebacker was a need. Duggar could be like that type of player. We talked about how they have guys like Sean Williams and Jesse Bates. Right now they added Von Bell, but you get another safety right there. There's 4 strong safeties, or 4 quality safeties there in their secondary if they were to add a guy like Chin. So I went with that pick. We should have went with offensive lineman with the pick at the top of the 2nd round, but and there's not really any available based on this mock at the time when we made the pick. So go ahead and you take the best player available and you add depth to the strong defensive side of the ball that they already have, because like I said, you can add depth there, and playing for the future, it's going to make their defense look really good on paper.
Yeah, I think if you were to add any of those safeties, I think it would be a good fit. And they could also, in that situation, if they were to draft a safety, they could move Sean Williams down into the nickel and play him there as well. That's another possibility. So, there's certainly different options and many routes that they can go on. I love the receiver out of Arizona State, Brandon Ayuk. This kid I think is going to be special. He's certainly a playmaker. We mentioned earlier, this receiving class is really deep, And to get a talent like him in the third round would be pretty awesome for the Bengals. We would hate it as Browns fans, but for the Bengals, I think that would be a really good get. But when you look at their roster and their needs, I would certainly go safety here to pair along with Von Bell and Jesse Bates to kind of have that nice rotation and develop a young guy behind Von Bell, maybe play alongside as well. I think that would be a great opportunity, and I'll again trust your pick with Jeremy Chin being the safety there. So when you look at the 3-round mock, we have Joe Burrow, the quarterback, AJ Spenza, edge rusher, and safety Jeremy Chin. Jack, I know we don't want the Bengals to succeed, but if that was their draft, I think that would be pretty solid, provided that their offensive line that they have currently is still kind of able to perform and is able to piece things together.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at the draft results now, I mean, I go by best player available, but within the 5 picks after the Bengals pick, 2 offensive linemen went. So that's why it's hard to do these mock drafts, because you look at need, but then you look at who's the best available on the board, and it also fits a need. So it's tricky to do these things. We've talked about this whole episode. They need to upgrade the offensive line. And then Urza Cleveland, who is a solid left tackle, and then Lloyd Cushenberry III, who is a solid interior offensive lineman, go right after. Kind of makes me wish I redid this mock. But, I like the picks I ultimately made for Cincinnati. Joe Burrow is going to be the pick. He upgrades the quarterback position. AJ Espenza upgrades at edge rusher, and then Jeremy Chin adds depth to the safety class, and he could come in and contribute potentially from day one. So ultimately we made the Bengals better, but then again, the offensive line still needs to be upgraded. So here we are.
Yeah, like we mentioned, this is also a deep tackle class as well. So they obviously have more draft picks that they can use on the offensive line in the rest of this draft. And I think we can't stress enough. We did best players available at each pick, so that's why we didn't reach for need. Even though, like you said, with the third round that there was a few that went right behind the safety Jeremy Chin that we took. So there's certainly opportunities for them to take O-line in this draft. It would be curious to see if they do. I would imagine that they will, based on their lack of an O-line right now. So I think the draft should be fun. I can certainly see them trading up from that second round pick, pick 33, maybe to grab a tackle at the end of the first round. If somebody starts to fall a little bit, I can certainly see that as well. So ultimately, we'll see what the Bengals think. We did a good job of piecing things together for them in this mock draft, and hopefully you guys liked it as well. Jack, before we get on out of here, is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, sir.
All right. As always, be sure to follow Jack on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Anthony Jokey. Be sure to follow the podcast and the website on Twitter at The Dogland. You can find that on Facebook as well. Be sure to rate, subscribe, review. We absolutely appreciate it. And I would be remiss if today we didn't wish a very happy birthday to friend of show and one of our good buddies on Twitter, Jeff Lloyd, the host of Locked On Browns. And today is also the birthday of Browns general manager Andrew Berry. So happy birthday to them both. And hopefully, I know you guys really can't go out and celebrate, but hopefully you guys have good birthdays. And with all that, to get on here, so go Browns.